Hello, I'm Samantha Rennie, the Community Education Manager at Tobin Brothers Funerals, and I specialise in grief and loss and supporting the community around that. One of the questions we've had asked is, what are the qualifications to become a grief specialist? My personal qualifications was, little did I know that it was teaching. I was an art teacher first of all, then I became a nurse, and I worked for 20 years in areas such as oncology, palliative care, the emergency department, education and critical care. And all of that involved grief and loss. And then finally I trained in counselling, kinesiology, and all of it ended up, the thread through it all was caring for people who were grieving. So I was a specialist both professionally and personally. But there are many pathways into grief and loss. And whether you're nursing or caring for people in whatever role, you are working in grief. To specialise in it and get the qualifications and training, there's certainly plenty of workshops, but the Australian Centre of Grief and Bereavement are the specialists in research on grief and loss in Australia, and they're at an international standard. They offer a conference every 2 years. They also run a Certificate 4 in bereavement support, and they also offer a graduate diploma in grief and bereavement, which is for counsellors and psychologists. So I hope that answers the question, but there are certainly many ways to become a bereavement and grief specialist in whatever field of work you are doing. People ask me how I prepare myself to work with grieving families, and it's been probably a long process of getting to the point where I can do it. And so now it's a bit like, for me, grief is like swimming around in a horrendous ocean and surf. And it's taken years to learn how to become a surf lifesaver. And watching people out in the surf, knowing how to sit there, guide them and give them the tools to also surf those waves of grief. It's been a lot of practice, but now I'm able to stand there knowing that they will be strong enough, able enough. And so I'm kind of just calm. I'm there to be their witness. I'm there to throw them the life-saving rope when they need it. I'm there to give them more tools when they're struggling. And that's really all I need to know. My main job is to listen, be their companion and support them and just offer a space of non-judgmental love. And that's easy. Another question's been, what is the difference between grief and loss? And then there's also bereavement, there's the word mourning, and what are all these different aspects? So bereavement is the experience of grief after a death. Grief is the experience of just any healing after any loss. So grief is a healing experience. It is what occurs after a loss. So a loss is anything that is of significance to your sense of self in the world. Whether it's the loss of an object that you really loved, whether it's the loss of somebody through death, whether it's the loss of family through divorce, whether it's the loss of a relationship, an animal, whatever the loss is, it is something that is significant to you. And so your sense of identity and who you are in the world changes. And the experience of integrating that is called grief. And that's a healing process. So there was another question about what was the most difficult aspect of my job and what's the most rewarding aspect of my job. And putting them together, I would say the most difficult aspect is sometimes watching people not love themselves and seeing how they don't trust themselves to grieve, how frightened they are, and how many myths there are out there that make us believe that it's wrong to cry, it's wrong to be angry, it's wrong to just stop and grieve. I guess I struggle with that. And I struggle with the judgment that other people have around that. But the most rewarding thing is watching people have the courage to overcome that, to go on the journey of grief and to see how they change and transform. Nothing could be better than that for me. And to be privileged enough to be doing this work is just an incredible honour that I can't believe I'm here doing it, and I can't believe I even get paid for it. It's just what life is all about, is watching people transform, evolve and come back to a place of love when they were disconnected from it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope I've answered your questions about being a grief and loss specialist and about grief and loss. And now just look out for the coming episodes of So You Want to Be.